Secular Lover on Twitter asks, if you had to choose between a religious humanist and an inhuman atheist, which one would you pick? Secular Lover, first of all, I love your name. I don't know if that's a reference to loving secular talk or if that's you're somebody who's a lover and you're secular, so you're calling it that. But either way, I like your name. The answer to that is very simple. I would rather have a religious humanist than an inhuman atheist. Because, okay, so the religious humanist, I don't think they're right on questions about God or spirituality or what have you. But if they're a humanist and they agree with me on the most important issues that affect the world, you know, like whatever, do you want to get money out of politics? Yes. Do you want to try to eliminate homelessness? Yes. Do you want to try to get people in the U.S. universal health care? Do you want to try to end the wars? Yes, yes, yes. Well, then we have there are more things that we agree on than we don't agree on. Now, on the flip side, if you have an inhuman atheist, you know, presumably if you talk to them, they'd say, no, I don't want people to have universal health care. You know, I don't necessarily want to end the wars. I think maybe some of them are justified. And you go down the list, so they would disagree with me on all the political issues, but they would agree with me that there's no God. Okay, so whoop-de-doo, you agree with me on one issue, but all the other issues that have a much bigger impact, you disagree with me on. So 100% I'd rather have a religious humanist because I simply would agree with them on more issues than I disagree with them. Captain Falcon asks, what's your honest opinion on the refugee crisis and the high crime and terrorism in Europe? Okay, so I've touched on this a little bit before, but I'll get into a little bit more detail now. The answer to that is very complex. It really is. I'm not just saying that. I'm not attempting to dodge the question. That's as straightforward an answer as I could give. It's a very complex answer to that. So I disagree with the demagogues on the right who, you know, really do in their rhetoric effectively smear all Muslims as the problem and say we should restrict all Muslim immigration. I think that is a deeply anti-civil libertarian approach, an anti-humanist approach. I think what a country needs to do is do your best to help out the people who really need help and are no threat to you, while at the same time, yes, having rigorous vetting procedures for people who come into the country who might be a threat. So I've discussed before the vetting procedure we have in the U.S. when it comes to refugees, and I think it's fantastic. There's, what is it, like 12 different government agencies they go through. It takes like 8 months to a year on average to get in here. You have all these different government agencies who do the background check. There's biometric screening. They dig through your records to the extent that they can. And once they've determined, okay, this person isn't really a threat, or you're not really taking a big chance on this person, then yeah, you let him in. Another thing the U.S. does is we, like 80% of the people who are refugees from Syria or from the Middle East that come in here, women and children, you know? So I think the U.S. does a decent job walking that line, or at least we did. Trump obviously is trying to take us in a further right-wing direction. But the U.S. did a decent job of being nuanced about it and saying, okay, we're the U.S. We want to help people who are caught in a war zone through no fault of their own, and they just want to survive and have a chance at a decent life. We need to help those people because if you're a decent human being, you should want to help those people. But at the same time, you want to be reasonable in your immigration policy, and you don't say, let's literally open up the borders and let anybody in for any goddamn reason, because then, yes, you're going to roll the dice and take some risks. And what's happened in some places in Europe is they have such lax immigration laws and rules that it's almost like an open borders policy. And as a result of that, yes, you've had a spike in crime, and you've had many downsides to it. Now, there's another component to this as well. Outside of being open to immigrants and refugees, but having a vetting procedure, you need to have a program in place or a system in place to assimilate people and make your country an actual melting pot. So from my understanding in Europe, it's much more segregated pockets of different kinds of people. whether you're, it's by ethnic background or if it's by religion or what have you. But you can have one pocket where, oh, that's where, Hasidic Jews are. There's a pocket where there's Muslims. Here's a pocket where, it's mostly white people. Like, that's a recipe for disaster. Because what you're saying is, hey, let's be segregated and keep it segregated, and okay, it's separate but equal. That's what we all are. Well, haven't we seen that fail somewhere in the past? What you want to do is you want to have assimilation and a melting pot, and the U.S. does a much better job of that, where, let's say you let in a Muslim family from Syria escaping the war. Okay, well, have a bunch of them, and then now we're going to sprinkle you in with a community that has Latino people, that has black people, that has white people, that has people with all different incomes and from different backgrounds. And then when you do that, people tend to assimilate into the society. And in the U.S., at least, their identity becomes American along with those other things. Whereas, if there's no sense of that national agreement and pride where we're all part of the same thing, well, then you can have segregated pockets, and that's a concept of multiculturalism that's bound to fail. The concept of multiculturalism that I agree with is when you have the different cultures intermingling, intermixing, and you're part of the same communities and society. When you have them in the same country but distinctly separate, then there's going to be more tensions and there's going to be a bigger backlash, and it's not going to work out as well. So it's a complex answer to that question. As you can tell, I've been going on about it for a while here now. But the answer is definitely not the thing that I think is more in vogue on the internet now, which is a bunch of demagogues on the right acting like, I gotta stop the Muslims from coming to the West. And it's a lot more complex than that. And yes, I think one can legitimately accuse somebody of bigotry if your answer is just shut down Muslim immigration. And that's what happened with, Trump, with total and complete shutdown of Muslims. That's what he said on the campaign trail. Yeah, I think that's 100% a bigoted policy, and you're not willing to give that group of people you're not willing to lend them the objectivity of viewing them as individuals and going on a case-by-case basis. You're saying, nah, they're all bad enough, so let's just not let any of them in the country. That, unfortunately, is a growing opinion in popularity on the internet, and I think it's wrong, and I think it's dangerous, and I think it's bigoted, and I think there needs to be a better job on the left rebutting that with answers kind of like I just gave, as opposed to, kind of a shrieking and saying, just open up the borders and let everybody in, or else you're a horrible person. No, there's a comfortable, nuanced, intelligent answer there that doesn't give in to the demagogues on the right.